It started like any other evening, or at least, that's what I told myself. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it had been for weeks. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. I sat alone in the living room, the faint glow of the TV casting shadows on the walls. Some reality show was playing, but I wasn't really watching. The voices from the screen were just background noise, a poor substitute for the conversations that used to fill this room. On the coffee table in front of me sat a bottle of whiskey, half empty or maybe half full, depending on how you looked at it. I wasn't sure when I'd started drinking so much. Maybe it was a few weeks ago, when the arguments with my husband, Mark, had become more frequent. Or maybe it was when I realized that the man I married felt like a stranger now, someone I barely recognized. Whatever the reason, the bottle had become my companion, my escape, my way of numbing the pain. I poured myself another glass, the amber liquid catching the light as it swirled in the tumbler. The first sip burned my throat, but I welcomed it. The burn was familiar, almost comforting. It was something I could count on, unlike everything else in my life. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster seemed to form patterns, like a map to somewhere I couldn't quite reach. My thoughts drifted, as they often did these days, to the past. To the days when Mark and I would laugh together, when we'd stay up late talking about our dreams, our future. Back then, it felt like we could conquer the world together. But now it felt like we were barely holding on. I took another sip, letting the warmth spread through me. The noise in my head was louder tonight, a chaotic mix of regrets, fears, and questions I couldn't answer. Why had we grown so far apart? Was it my fault? His? Or was it just the way things were meant to be? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that the silence between us was deafening, and the only way I could drown it out was with the whiskey. The bottle was almost empty now, and the room was starting to spin. I tried to focus on the TV, but the images blurred together, a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes that made no sense. My eyelids felt heavy, like they were made of lead. I wanted to get up, to go to bed, but my body wouldn't cooperate. It was as if the weight of everything, the loneliness, the guilt, the fear, had finally caught up to me, pinning me to the couch. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness swallow me whole. For a moment, it felt like relief. No more thoughts, no more pain, just nothingness. But even in that emptiness, there was a part of me that knew this wasn't the answer. That drinking myself into oblivion wasn't going to fix anything. But what else could I do? I felt so lost, so broken, like a ship adrift in a storm with no lighthouse to guide me. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of the TV, still humming in the background. And then, nothing. Just darkness. When I woke up, it wasn't morning. The room was cloaked in darkness, the kind of darkness that feels alive, like it's pressing in on you from all sides. My head was pounding, a relentless drumbeat that echoed in my skull. I groaned softly, trying to piece together where I was and how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was the whiskey, the TV, the suffocating silence. And then, nothing. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. It was heavy, unresponsive, as if someone had filled my veins with lead. My limbs refused to cooperate, and I slumped back onto the couch, disoriented and dizzy. The air smelled stale, like old alcohol and sweat, and I could taste the bitterness of the whiskey on my tongue. My mouth was dry, my throat scratchy, and I desperately wanted a glass of water, but the thought of moving again felt impossible. That's when I noticed him. He was standing over me, silent and still, like a shadow that had detached itself from the walls. My stepson, Gaius. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision, but his face remained obscured, half hidden in the dim light filtering through the curtains. I couldn't read his expression, but there was something about the way he looked at me, something in the way his eyes glinted in the darkness, that made my stomach twist into a knot. Gaius? I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. It sounded foreign to my own ears, weak and shaky. What are you doing here? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. My heart began to race, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears. I tried to sit up again, but my body still wouldn't obey. I felt trapped, vulnerable, like a butterfly pinned to a board. "You shouldn't sleep here," he said finally, his voice low and calm, almost soothing. But there was an edge to it, something sharp and dangerous that sent a shiver down my spine. He reached down, his hand closing around my arm, and pulled me to my feet. His grip was firm, almost too firm, and I stumbled, my legs wobbling beneath me. I can manage," I mumbled, trying to pull away, but he didn't let go. Instead, he tightened his hold, his fingers digging into my skin. I winced, but he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't care. "Come on," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He started leading me down the hallway, his steps steady and sure, while I struggled to keep up. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but everything felt hazy, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the walls closing in around me as we walked. I could hear the sound of our footsteps, the creak of the floorboards beneath our weight, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. But there was something else too, a tension in the air, thick and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. When we reached the bedroom, he guided me to the edge of the bed and helped me sit down. His hands lingered on my shoulders for a moment too long, and I felt a cold knot of dread form in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to say something, to tell him to leave, but the words caught in my throat. My mind was screaming at me to move, to fight, to do something, but my body felt like it was made of stone. And then, he started undressing me. I didn't resist. How could I? My mind was a foggy mess, thoughts slipping through my fingers like water. The alcohol had dulled everything, my senses, my reflexes, my ability to think clearly. I was too drunk to argue, too tired to fight. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore, heavy and unresponsive, as if I were watching myself from somewhere far away. Gaius guided me down the hallway, his hand firm on my arm. I stumbled a few times, my legs wobbling beneath me, but he kept me upright, his grip steady and unyielding. The hallway seemed endless, the walls closing in around me as we moved. The dim light from the living room cast long shadows that danced on the walls, making everything feel surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When we reached the bedroom, he helped me sit on the edge of the bed. His movements were careful, almost gentle, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe he was just trying to help me. Maybe he was being kind. But that thought didn't last long. I remember thinking how strange it was, how out of character it seemed for him to be so tender, so considerate. Gaius had always been quiet, reserved, almost distant. He wasn't the type to show concern, especially not toward me. But there he was, kneeling in front of me, his hands resting lightly on my knees as he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. And then, everything changed. He started undressing me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. My brain couldn't process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it. But the alcohol had dulled my thoughts, making everything feel slow and disjointed, like a broken film reel skipping frames. I tried to push him away, to stop him, but my arms felt like they were made of lead. I willed them to move, to fight, but they wouldn't obey. It was like I was trapped inside my own body, screaming at myself to do something, anything, but unable to make it happen. My heart was pounding, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears, but the rest of me felt numb, disconnected. I tried to speak, to tell him to stop, but the words wouldn't come out. My throat felt tight, constricted, like I was choking on the air itself. All I could manage was a weak, trembling whisper, barely audible even to myself. "Don't," I pleaded, my voice breaking. But he didn't stop. He didn't even seem to hear me. I felt a wave of panic rise inside me, cold and suffocating. My chest tightened, and I struggled to breathe, each gasp of air feeling like it wasn't enough. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed, helpless and terrified, as he continued what he was doing. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in around me. I wanted to close my eyes, to block it all out, but I couldn't. I was trapped, forced to watch as my own body betrayed me, as my mind struggled to keep up with the horror unfolding in front of me. The room spun around me as I struggled to keep my eyes open, the effects of the alcohol taking complete control of my body. My thoughts were muddled, my limbs felt heavy, and my voice was barely above a whisper. I couldn't fully understand what was happening, but a deep unease settled over me as he moved closer. I remember the unsettling weight of his hands on me, rough and insistent, each touch sending a cold wave of fear through my body. His fingers trailed over my skin with a sense of entitlement, completely disregarding the boundaries I couldn't even voice. My body felt like it was betraying me, heavy and unresponsive, as though the alcohol had stolen not just my strength but my very ability to resist. I tried to move, to push him away, but my arms felt like lead, useless against his advances. A feeble attempt to shove him back barely made him flinch, and the look in his eyes told me he knew how powerless I was in that moment. My mind screamed for him to stop, but the words remained stuck in my throat, swallowed by the haze of intoxication that blurred the edges of reality. He ignored my weak protests, his focus entirely on his own satisfaction. The way he moved, so deliberate and shameless, made it clear that my discomfort meant nothing to him. I could feel the weight of his disregard pressing down on me, as though my inability to resist had erased my humanity in his eyes. I wanted to cry, to shout, to make him see the violation of what he was doing, but my voice was nothing more than a whisper lost in the night. Every moment felt like an eternity as he disregarded my vulnerability, treating my body like it was his for the taking. The weight of his actions pressed down on me, leaving me unable to escape the situation. My mind screamed for it to stop, but my voice remained silent, lost in the haze of intoxication and fear. When it was over, he left without a word. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What had just happened? How could this be real? I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I stumbled to the bathroom, where I collapsed on the floor and cried until I had no tears left. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and a sinking feeling in my chest. I wanted to believe it had all been a nightmare, but the bruises on my arms told me otherwise. I felt dirty, violated, and ashamed. How could I face Jake? How could I face my husband? How could I face myself? I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of life but feeling completely disconnected from it. I avoided Gaius as much as possible, but every time I saw him, my stomach churned. He acted like nothing had happened, like everything was normal. It made me sick. I thought about telling my husband, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would he say? Would he even believe me? And even if he did, what would happen to our family? I felt trapped, like there was no way out. But as the days turned into weeks, the weight of what had happened became too much to bear. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I needed to talk to someone, to get help. So, I called my best friend, Sarah, and asked her to come over. When she arrived, I broke down and told her everything. She listened without judgment, holding my hand as I cried. When I finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You need to report this. You can't let him get away with it." I knew she was right, but the thought of going to the police terrified me. What if they didn't believe me? What if they blamed me for what happened? But Sarah was adamant. "You're not alone," she said. "I'll be with you every step of the way." With her support, I found the courage to file a report. The process was grueling, reliving the details of that night, answering endless questions, facing Jake in court. But through it all, Sarah was by my side, reminding me that I was strong, that I deserved justice. In the end, my stepson was convicted and sentenced to prison. It didn't erase what had happened, but it gave me a sense of closure. I knew I still had a long road ahead of me, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. That night changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It wasn't just a single moment, it was a seismic shift, a crack that split my life into before and after. Before, I had trusted the world to make sense. I had believed in the safety of my home, in the people around me, in the idea that bad things only happened to other people. But after, I saw the world for what it really was, a place where darkness could creep into even the most familiar corners, where the people you thought you knew could become strangers in an instant. It shattered my trust, not just in others, but in myself. I replayed that night over and over in my mind, asking myself the same questions. Why didn't I fight harder? Why couldn't I stop him? Why did I let it happen? The guilt gnawed at me, a constant ache that I couldn't escape. I felt like I had failed myself, like I had somehow allowed it to happen. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I hadn't failed. I had survived. It shattered my sense of safety, too. The walls of my home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway, sent a jolt of fear through me. I couldn't sleep without leaving the lights on, and even then, I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing at the slightest noise. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like I was watching myself from the outside, going through the motions but never really being present. But as much as it broke me, that night also showed me how strong I am. It showed me that even in my darkest moment, when I felt completely powerless, there was a part of me that refused to give up. A part of me that kept going, even when everything inside me wanted to stop. I didn't see it at first, all I could see was the pain, the fear, the shame. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I began to realize that I was still here. I was still fighting. And that meant something. I'm still healing. Some days are better than others. Some days, I feel like I'm making progress, like I'm finally starting to put the pieces back together. Other days, it feels like I'm back at square one, like the weight of what happened is crushing me all over again. But even on those days, I remind myself that healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated and painful, but it's also necessary. And I'm learning to be patient with myself, to give myself the grace I need to keep going. I'm still learning to live with what happened. It's not something I can ever forget, and I don't think I should. What happened to me is a part of my story, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't get to decide who I am or what I'm capable of. I'm more than what was done to me. I'm more than the pain, the fear, the shame. I'm a survivor, and that means something. I'm not giving up. I'm fighting for myself, for my future, and for the person I used to be. That person, the one who laughed easily, who trusted freely, who believed in the goodness of the world, she's still in there somewhere. And I'm going to find her again. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but I'm determined to get there. I owe it to myself to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing that there's still light on the other side of this darkness. Because I've already survived the worst. And if I can survive that, I can survive anything.